Thank you so much for tuning in. This is a Common Rule podcast, and I am your humble narrator. My name is Danny. And sorry about the length of time between episodes here. You know, been going through some things, been doing some stuff. Well, I'll get into that in a little bit here. One of the things I think kept me, I had been working on an episode, that's for sure. I was ready to come out, give my thoughts on something. While the episode is basically going to remain the same, the meaning of the episode actually completely changed for me. A lot of things have been happening here that are very tragic, for sure. I don't want it to be a downer, this podcast, this episode, but it might be. Let me apologize beforehand about that. It might be a little sad, actually. It sucks because I decided to go ahead and record this on my birthday today. Why not? It's my birthday. Just go ahead and record an episode and record this specific episode. I told you I've been working on this past episode, and truth be told, I had done a couple of recordings on it, but yeah, I got a little too emotional about something and about a particular thing that we're going to get into here, and I just decided to kind of back away from it and not get so emotional in order to be more clear about what it is that I want to talk about today and what is going to be important as being an artist or being someone who creates. And in certain situations, I think more or less being someone who creates, who archives, and who records in a certain fashion. And originally, this was from a viewpoint as a photographer. I was going to look at this from my photography standpoint. I am going through a process of archiving and re-editing a lot of my photos, and I've been doing that for a while now. And I was just, wondering what it was that I was doing at certain points. You start questioning your past work. And the other thing that I was thinking about as well is podcasting. What does it mean? What am I doing? This isn't the only podcast I have. I have a bunch of other podcasts that really are just, for fun. But this is really my heart and soul into it. This is what I want to talk about, the creative process. I want to talk about creating and talking to artists and, through my experience as well, make something meaningful out of this podcast without having to worry about making money, getting sponsors, anything like that. I've never asked for money. I've never done anything other than record and put it out. There's no reason for me to shut down this podcast as far as because of monetary reasons, because, oh my God, I'm not making money. Or, even the other thing is like, oh my God, no one's listening sort of thing. This podcast does get a few downloads. It certainly isn't like the most famous podcast out there. It's definitely not as big as your favorite podcast, whatever it is you're listening to, whether it be that one cat in Texas or the murder shit or the fucking stories about, the journalistic stories, whatever it may be, the comedians, the actors. This podcast is nowhere near that. I digress. Let me jump into what this podcast was originally going to be about. I started talking about photography and I started thinking about my past work. And then I started thinking about recording mostly. And some of you know I'm a huge Jimi Hendrix fan. And one of the things that he did was he recorded just about everything he ever did, whether it was in the studio, recording an actual album, whether it was a live performance on the road, whether it was just sketching out songs in his room. He always had a tape recorder around with him. Funny enough, too, there's also a lot of pictures with him with a camera running around. I would love to see those pictures someday. I'm not sure where they would be. He was fascinated with recording everything that he had. And because of that, whether it's good music or not good music, whatever your definition of that is, me as being one of these disciples, anything that he ever did, I'm like fascinated with. He has a mountain of work that can be released, even if it's just a sketchbook of how he wrote Cherokee Mist versus a bunch of other sketches of later on towards his Electric Ladyland days. Prince also did this thing where he recorded obsessively, and as some of you know, the amount he can release an album for, I think, for the next 20 years. You know, him being passed, may he rest in peace as well. Just to name another band, just throw it out there, Pearl Jam has got so many bootlegs and so many different concerts out there that, again, is just a complete catalog of what their music could be or what their music is in different forms, in different countries, in different versions. And you start thinking about artists like Picasso, whose tremendous body of work spans years, trends, you know, the way he shaped not just his own work, but influenced a bunch of other people as well. Photographers like Henri Cartier-Bresson, Annie Leibovitz, of course. I love her portraiture work. Of course, you guys, if you follow any of my work, you know I love Helmut Newton and his work. Weston, all those Westons, they're crazy. Well, they're like the Wayans brothers of photography. There's so many of them, I lost track. And there's this other cat named Eggleston who actually I share a birthday with, and his color work is absolutely amazing. And what happens is, as a photographer, is that you naturally accumulate this vast catalog of images, some that work, some that don't work, some that you want to throw away, some that you keep for no fucking apparent reason other than you had a good day that day and that bottle of Coke looked really good. And I'm sure maybe filmmakers go through this as well, but you just amount a massive amount of crap. You look at some documentaries, I think one of the most readily available documentaries that show how much rolls of film you can accumulate in a short amount of time is a Vivian Maier documentary, where it shows how many rolls are out there that the guy, I'm not sure if they've all been processed yet, I'm pretty sure they have, but in the short time that she was probably shooting work, and I'm talking about as a photographer, relatively short time, I'm sure she was photographing a lot during that span, but she certainly wasn't a National Geographic photographer per se, who just images upon images. And, you know, she had a tremendous amount of film, of images that she just had and needed to develop. We, fortunately, get to see a lot of the good ones. Brought me to the point, you know, what now? I have a bunch of work. What does it mean as someone who's not Jimi Hendrix, who's not Prince, who's not Neil Young, to amass all these recordings, who's not David Bowie, to where, all right, man, I want to hear everything the Beatles did from fucking 1962 to 1963. I don't give a fuck what it sounds like, sort of thing, you know? I'm not those people for many reasons. That's not to say that even some of you out there don't have the same talent that some of these famous people that you admire through history and through luck and through just sheer life. We are not as renowned as, you know, Jackson Pollock. So you start to question what it is that you do. And I'm sure that a lot of us have been through this. You start to question, why am I doing this? And as a podcaster, again, I start to question, why am I recording so many podcasts? Why am I doing this? I obviously don't have millions of listeners. I don't have that Spotify contract that's going to give me $100 million a year or whatever these fucking guys are making nowadays. To put it bluntly, is it a waste of time? And that's a hard question to answer because internally, I don't feel that it is. But at one point, you have to you start questioning, and in a weird way, self-doubt creeps in. And I don't think that this is just certainly applies to anybody who's creative. I think this applies to anyone who's an artist. I think this applies to anyone who's creative. And anyone that probably lacked the support to keep going with an idea that they've had, no one was there to say, dude, that's pretty good, or you know what, keep at it. Everyone's like, man, nobody likes this. This sucks. And every once in a while, you get hit with something. I've talked to you about where I made that photograph of the a Native American cemetery, which is believed to be one of the last resting places of Sacagawea. I had it at an art show. Thank you, Grandpa Drew, for that. I had it at a Film Flam art show. A stranger comes up to me and, you know, expresses how much he appreciates the photograph. And he starts to tell me about his grandmother who was Native and who had recently passed. It's very difficult to put into words that something like that, you know, I've never would have thought in a million years that something that I created would affect somebody so deeply. I think that's the important part of it is that somewhere along the line, you make something that matters to someone, even if it's not yourself. that somewhere along the lines, and I say that in the sense that it obviously matters to you because you created it. You're the artist. You archived it in some way. You put some value to it. Some of you know that I love to take a lot of pictures at anything. I just let it click, click, click. And at one point, it's like, why do you take so many pictures? And it's like, well, at that fraction of a second, that moment mattered to me somehow. Maybe later on when I look at it and I start culling the pictures and saying, okay, which one's good, which one's not good, I start to question, well, this one's good. And I start to measure the photograph that I took up against the rest of the photographs that I took on either that roll or that card or whatever. And I start to gauge that photograph in a different light because all the other photographs around it are better or worse. Somehow the value of that photograph, of that single fraction of a second, increases or decreases after you start looking at the photography as a whole. But even if it doesn't stand up, at that moment, that photograph meant something to you, or it meant something to me. And I think at some point where the Primus album, the Hits album, is They Can't All Be Zingers, resonates. They can't all be zingers. You gotta, strikes and gutters, dude. And this is all happening, I'm thinking about this, and it's all happening during a weird time in my life, actually. It's not that weird, comparatively speaking, but I'll tell you why. So I've moved to Mexico. Some of you may or may not know that. I have a cool little place down here. I love living here. It's really nice. There's a certain adjustment period of having to go through things. There's a certain level of frustration. Funny, as I mentioned to my buddy, my friend, I mentioned to her, I said, you know what? Living in Mexico is like putting up with your gorgeous, toxic girlfriend at some points, man, because it is, your patience does grow thin sometimes, but it is worth it, to me anyway. And going through this, there's a certain health issue that came up. Some of you know my eye, I lost sight in my eye and I needed emergency surgery. Thank goodness for my brother who came through, helped me, was able to help me get funding for it miraculously, and I was able to have surgery, and right now I'm on the mend, and it seems like I will be able to regain most of my sight back, but I will have to wear glasses from here on out, which is, hey, better than nothing, right? And, you start to think about these things and you start to go through this, but then slowly but surely certain things start to hit you. Certain stories come up. I'm having friends who are battling with mental illness. I have people that are getting sick. I have people that are not having a good time through life. And so those things remind me that, hey, you know what? I'm alive and I'm doing well, and I'm very grateful to where I'm at right now. I can't complain about life at all in my position. I'm doing fine. I'm doing okay, despite of what I think about myself or what my health issues are as far as my eyesight goes. Other than that, I'm all right. Which brings me to this emotional part of this thing that it brings it all together here. How some of my questions have been answered through the things that happen in life. Johnny Medina, a.k.a. Johnny Blacksox, I got an email from his sister on July 12th. He passed away, and it hit me. And at the risk of making this about myself or being a narcissist or anything like that, let me I'm going to read you this email that she sent. I'm just going to go in one shot. I'm going to try and make it through it, but bear with me if I'm not going to fucking re-record this anymore. So I'm just going to get through it and see what happens here. Good afternoon. My name is Rosie, and my brother's name was Johnny Medina, a.k.a. Johnny Blacksox. You interviewed him for your podcast in 2019. Thank you for your gift of being able to hear his voice, his laugh, his thoughts, and expressions. Sadly, my brother passed away on June 28th. I wasn't sure if you were aware and thought you might want to know. Thank you once again. In addition to his photography, his podcast is a little piece of immortality that we can visit and revisit. While he was in the hospital, his 11-year-old boy spent his days listening to his father's voice on your podcast. With deep appreciation, Rosie. That hits kind of hard on a few things, on a few levels here. And I mentioned the date, July 12th, the anniversary of my dad's death is July 14th. His birthday is July 26th. My birthday is July 27th. And I only mention that to say that I know what that little 11-year-old boy is going through. Again, I don't want to make this about me, but and in one email, there lies a justification to keep doing whatever it is that one wants to do, to keep creating, to keep recording, to keep going with the notion that maybe you're doing something good out there. Through this tragedy, maybe, there's inspiration to keep going forward, to keep creating, to keep moving forward creatively and compassionately. And to his little boy, if you're listening, I can only tell you this. Let the memory of your father warm your heart. Don't let the unfair tragedy make your heart cold, bitter, or full of rage. You will get through this. It's just a matter of time. And just to add to this, you don't have, if I can drive a point here, and I think I have, but just to, you don't have to be famous to create something worthwhile. It doesn't have to go viral. You don't have to get rich off of it. And you don't have to get 1 million likes or downloads for this. It just has to come from a good place, in my opinion. For a podcast here, I'd like to do something kind of weird to finish it off here. If you would share with me a little moment of silence for a podcast. And it's not about grief. I don't think it's about anything in that aspect. But I think maybe to reflect on the things that we do have and that we are grateful for. And also, in memory of Johnny Medina, to have a little moment of silence on a podcast, which is, at this point, the best I can do. A little moment of silence for Johnny. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I'm sorry that this was probably a little bit of a downer. Hopefully it's more of a pensive podcast. Maybe it'll not only help you appreciate the skills, the life you already have, but maybe inspire you to move forward and keep creating and keep doing what it is that you're doing, and that it is worthwhile, and that somewhere, somehow, validation would come of good, honest work. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Take it easy and enjoy your youth. I know Johnny did.